The Birmingham Children's Crusade of 1963. In our continuing coverage of Black History Month, we look back at the Birmingham Children's Crusade of 1963. Kim Gilmore, February 14th, 2014. Our Black History coverage continues with a look at the Children's Crusade of 1963, a pivotal event of the Civil Rights Movement which opened the eyes of a nation through the courageous activism of its youngest citizens. We were told in some of the mass meetings that the day would come when we could really do something about all of these inequalities that we were experiencing, and we were calling it D-Day. It was May 2nd, 1963, remembers Janice Kelsey. Kelsey was one of thousands of young people who participated in a series of nonviolent demonstrations known as the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama, during the first week of May, 1963. For many African American children in Birmingham, the Civil Rights Movement was already a part of their lives. They had witnessed their parents involved through mass meetings organized at churches like the 16th Street Baptist Church. While many parents and civil rights leaders were cautious about involving young people in the protest, it turned out that the brave actions of these children helped make lasting change in Birmingham at a key turning point in the movement. All right, so in this paragraph, I would like you to underline that parents and civil rights leaders were cautious about involving young people. And then off to the side, I want you to write why with a question mark. Why do you think that parents didn't necessarily want their children involved in any of these protests, even though they were heavily involved? In addition, off to the side, I'd like you to write the main idea that children start to get involved. So we've got main idea here, put a star by it, and we've also got the question of why. Why do you think parents were very, very hesitant to let their children be involved in this movement? Go ahead and pause the video while you write those things. All right, let's go ahead and go on with the second paragraph. Early in 1963, civil rights leaders in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, and other civil rights groups developed a plan to desegregate Birmingham, a city notorious for its discriminatory practices in employment and public life. Segregation persisted throughout the city, and blacks were allowed to go to many places, like the fairgrounds, only on colored days. The goal of the plan was to use tactics of nonviolent protest to provoke Birmingham civic and business leaders to agree to desegregate. The demonstrations started in April 1963 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and local leader Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth led thousands of African American protesters in Birmingham. The first phase of the campaign resulted in many arrests, including Dr. King, who penned his powerful letter from a Birmingham jail on April 16th. A circuit court judge had issued an injunction against protest, picketing, and demonstrating and boycotting, providing the legal grounds for mass arrests. Go ahead and either with a highlighter or underline this last sentence here. This is a very important sentence. Now, I need you to remember that this is 1963 in Birmingham. Many of our events have already taken place. We had Emmett Till, who started the movement in 1955. We've got Rosa Parks and the bus boycott in 1956. In 1957, we had moved on to desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas. And now, 1963, several years later, Birmingham is still having these huge problems with segregation and discrimination. Furthermore, as people were trying to stop some of these things, a judge issued an injunction, you might not know what that is, that's an order, against protest. Protests are largely considered a constitutional right. So a judge illegally ordered that people protesting, picketing, and demonstrating could be arrested. This is unfair. So maybe make that note on your paper that this was an unfair practice, but it happened and there was nothing people could do about it. Paragraph 3. As the campaign continued that month, SCLC leader James Bevel started to enact plans for a children's crusade that he and other leaders believed might help turn the tide in Birmingham. Thousands of children were trained in the tactics of nonviolence. On May 2nd, they left the 16th Street Baptist Church in groups, heading throughout the city to protest segregation peacefully. One of their goals was to talk to the mayor of Birmingham about segregation in their city. They were not met with a peaceful response. On the first day of the protest, hundreds of children were arrested. By the second day, Commissioner of Public Safety Bull O'Connor ordered police to spray the children with powerful water hoses, hit them with batons, and threaten them with police dogs. In this paragraph, I'd like you to underline the fact that they started to enact plans for a children's crusade. And I want you to, again, think about why. Why do you think that children were used this time instead of their parents? When all of these terrible things happen to children, we're talking children, little kids, elementary school kids, kids your age, why would they risk their children's safety to take on this type of hateful attitude? Make sure you make these notes. Paragraph 4. Despite this harsh treatment, children continued to volunteer to participate in the demonstrations over the next few days. Footage and photographs of the violent crackdown in Birmingham circulated throughout the nation and the world, causing an outcry. Businesses downtown Birmingham were feeling the pressure. On May 5th, protesters marched to the city jail where many of the young people were still being held. They sang protest songs and continued their tactics of nonviolent demonstration. Finally, local officials had agreed to meet with civil rights leaders and hash out a plan to end the protests. On May 10th, an agreement had been reached. City leaders agreed to desegregate businesses and to free all who had been jailed during the demonstrations. Weeks later, the Birmingham Board of Education announced that all the students who had been involved in the Children's Crusade would be expelled. This decision was ultimately overturned by the Court of Appeals. In this paragraph, I'd like you to, off to the side, go ahead and write the main idea that the protests were highly successful. The protests worked. They got what they wanted through by using nonviolent tactics. I'd also like to make a note of the fact that any children who were participating in the Children's Crusade were expelled. However, they also had another huge victory when this was overturned by the Court of Appeals. Make sure you also make these notes. Paragraph 5. The Children's Crusade marked a significant victory in Birmingham. The city was in the world spotlight, and local officials knew that they could no longer ignore the civil rights movement. Yet the struggle for equality in Birmingham continued. Later that year, in September 1963, 4 little girls were killed by bombs planted by white supremacists at the 16th Street Baptist Church, and over 20 more were injured. The horrific bombings sent shockwaves through the nation. Despite this violent reaction to the movement for equality and justice, everyday people in Birmingham continued their efforts, and thousands of children, some of them as young as 7 or 8 years old, had kept the momentum of the struggle going in its most pivotal hour. In this paragraph, I would like you to note that the struggle was still happening months later in September. So let's go ahead and make a note that this is 4 months later. 4 months after the protesters had won that victory by having the city desegregated, businesses and such. 4 months later, these terrible things were still happening. I'd also like you to note this. It's very important. The fact that the world, not just the nation, the world was watching. The world could see the things that were happening in the United States, and everyone was horrified. Make sure you have these notes. Go back and make them if you need to in the video, and then you can wait for instructions.